if everyone could take a seat, that would be great. I want to thank everyone again for attending today. Oh wow, this is a good crowd. Usually it takes about a half an hour just to get people to get into the room. And then another half hour for them to settle down. This crowd is like, I don't think anyone's awake yet. Well, I'm glad to see everyone's ready to pay attention though. Before we begin, again, I want to thank our sponsors because they mean so much to us. Corporate sponsors, Rockland Trust, Select Energy, Mass DOT, Northeastern Savings Bank, South Shore Bank, and Platinum Partners. Our corporate sponsors, annual corporate sponsors, are Northmark, Model DeStefano Architects, and U.S. Pavement. And I also want to thank our partner in this event, which is our 5th annual event. I want to thank the Metro South Chamber of Commerce. And that being said, I want to introduce the person that makes everything happen for the Metro South Chamber, Chris Cooney, the president.
That would actually be Hannah and Emma that make everything happen. So let's have a round of applause for Hannah and Emma on our side.
Yeah, you can do that. Right there.
Oh, yes, great, thanks. So welcome. Good morning. Thank you, Rick. It's my pleasure to welcome you all today to this wonderful venue provided by the Randolph Showcase Cinema. As the Metro South Chamber of Commerce, we're proud to serve as a hub for business growth and development in this dynamic region. Is this working? Our mission is clear. It's to meet the unique needs of our member businesses while promoting for economic vitality in the Metro South region. You want to give me that? I'll just hold this, it's fine. For over 111 years, we've worked to attract the energies and ambitions of businesses, foster critical discussions on key issues, and showcase the many advantages of this region. The renovation of the historic Thomas Edison Power Station, now home to the Chamber at 60 School Street in the city of Brockton, reflects our ongoing commitment to growth. And this building not only provides office space, but also serves as a business assistance center, bringing together numerous public and private organizations in support of local businesses throughout the region as they navigate in today's economic landscape. Our work builds on a foundation laid by forward-thinking business leaders over a century ago, from the founding of the Brockton Board of Trade to the creation of the Chamber of Commerce. As we look to the future, we remain dedicated to projecting a positive image of the Metro South region and positioning our region to seize new opportunities ahead. We're here to help, and our team is ready to support you, whether it's through private consultation, targeted advocacy, business research, or educational events. The Chamber is here to ensure your success. Thank you for being here today, for contributing your attention to this important topic of new commuter rail transportation and expanded housing. As we all know, Massachusetts is very hungry for some housing. In fact, some people would say starving for housing. And today we're going to talk about both those topics and how they're closely aligned. Before I introduce our MC for today, please join me in a warm round of applause for our special guest, Secretary Monica Tibbetts-Nutt, who's here. Just give a round of applause. Welcome her. We're delighted that she's here. We had a chance to talk a little earlier, and she said she has not been to the Metro South region very much. She's been to most of the state, and she was looking forward to being here today. We've been working with her office since the spring to get her here, and we're delighted that she's here, especially with the new rail opening in March from Fall River to Bedford, running through the city of Brockton. I also want to thank our panelists, Peter, Paul, Stephen, Rachel, and Mike. You're going to hear from them. And finally, I want to thank our partners at the New England Real Estate Journal, specifically John Picard, the owner of New England Real Estate Journal, and Rick Kaplan for their support of this program. So thank you, John and Rick. It's also nice to have with us the Chamber Ambassador team, along with our volunteer photographer and Brockton Community Access Station. Thank you for covering this event. As we know, housing is critical to this region, and Brockton is right now in the midst of a building boom of about 12 or 15 projects that are underway for new housing along the rail. We're delighted also to have with us, as a result of that building boom, I believe, the mayor of Brockton, Bob Sullivan, who has talked to me. Bob, Mayor, thanks for coming. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Fred Clark, our moderator today. Fred is the president of Bridgewater State University, educating thousands of students from accountants to pilots and many school teachers in between. The university employs more than 1,800 people and produces an economic impact of more than $50 million annually. We feel it, we see it. Everyone knows somebody who's gone to Bridgewater State or is working there. Fred also has nearly 3,000 students living on campus. Actually, I heard this morning it was 3,100 as of today. And hosts an MBTA commuter rail station with service to Boston and throughout the region. Please join me in welcoming Fred Clark.
Thank you very much, Chris. I want to thank the Chamber for its leadership and also Rick Kaplan for your leadership in bringing us all together around housing and transit. I think it's perfect that we're in a movie theater, don't you? I've never been in a movie theater for a business meeting. And by the way, the people in the back, do not fall asleep in those comfy chairs. We'll be watching you intently. But hopefully, as we talk about the intersection of transit, transportation, and housing, this will probably be a drama if it was a movie. Hopefully not a horror movie, definitely not a comedy, and probably be good if it was a documentary, I think, just a straight out documentary. So we look forward to the conversation today, and Mayor Sullivan, thank you also for joining us as well. We have really a remarkable panel, as Chris just said, and I think they're going to be able to offer a lot to help us to understand the different dynamics that are in Massachusetts today in regards to transportation and housing, and it really comes into play in southeastern Massachusetts in particular with the extension of the rail line to New Bedford and Fall River, which we hope will be opening this spring. So as we look forward, you know, I'm the president of Bridgewater State. We have 10,000 students, and when I talk to our students, half of them are first generation. I do worry, you know, will they be able to stay in Massachusetts? Will they be able to live here? Especially those who want to serve the public, social workers or teachers or people in health sciences, whatever it might be. So talking about housing production is really personal and critical because I see these students every single day, and you do hope that they'll be able to stay in Massachusetts. 85% of our students at Bridgewater stay in Massachusetts right now. 95% come from Massachusetts. So to talk about all these issues, we are so fortunate to have Secretary Monica Tibbetts-Nutt, who oversees transportation and all of its aspects. And we also have Michael Lambert, the leader of the Brockton Area Transit Authority, to talk about their perspectives. We have about 200,000 units of housing that are required to be built in Massachusetts, according to the governor and the governor's administration. Hopefully, within 5 years, we'll build 40,000 of those units. And hopefully, we'll have probably rail and transportation to incentivize the construction of that housing. As Chris Cooney said yesterday, private investment always follows public investment, and there is a massive amount of public investment going on. So we want to hear first from the Secretary, who needs to scoot at around 10 o'clock. So let me do a very brief introduction of Monica Tibbetts-Nutt, the Secretary of Transportation, CEO of the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. As Secretary, she's responsible for 4 divisions of MassDOT: Highway, Rail and Transit, the Registry of Motor Vehicles, and Aeronautics. Frankly, that sounds like an easy portfolio, Secretary. I don't see any real issues there. But also serves on the Massport and MBTA Board of Directors. Secretary Tibbetts-Nutt was sworn in by Governor Healy as Secretary of Transportation last November, which probably seems like decades ago. But in a previous role as Undersecretary, she led the effort to establish the first ever Office of Transportation and Climate Planning and Policy, and served on the MassDOT Board of Directors and as the Vice Chair of the Fiscal Management and Control Board that oversaw the MBTA from 2015 to 2021. Prior to joining the Governor's Cabinet, the Secretary was Executive Director of the 128 Business Council, with areas of specialty including regional and transportation planning, urban design, transit equity. The Secretary is an active member of the American Institute of Certified Planners and a lead accredited professional in building, design, and construction within the United States Green Building Council. So, my friends, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Secretary of Transportation, Monica Tibbetts-Nutt.
Thank you, President Clark. And I also want to thank Chris Cooney and the Chamber for having me here today, and also Mayor Sullivan for hosting us here today. Transportation, economic development, and housing are intrinsically linked. I am constantly saying that housing has a transportation problem and transportation has a housing problem. And I think anyone that is on our roadways knows that. And I think the business community feels that more than I think some industries. This administration understands that and understands that economic development really relies on housing and transportation. We can't support businesses, we can't support educational institutions, we can't support healthcare institutions if people can't actually get to them. We know that if we can't build more housing, the congestion is just going to get worse. I commuted here this morning, and the thing I always tell people is I live in Devens. So from Devens to Boston, it can be anywhere from 50 minutes to 2 hours. Really depends on what weird elements have conspired against me getting to work that particular morning. And it's getting worse. I think anyone that remembers what it was like during the pandemic, you could just get everywhere super quickly. And I think now that people have come back, now that more businesses are requiring people to come back more days of the week, the congestion is getting worse. And one of the big things that I talk about is there are only a couple tools to ease congestion. People can just stop going places, which is what we did in the pandemic. You can do that. Or people can have transit options that are better than driving. It has to be better than driving. And I think when we talk about that, it really is looking at passenger rail. And the thing that people ask me a lot is, how do we make the decisions on who gets what? Everyone knows we have limited funds. Any state has limited funds, especially when it comes to transportation, and especially when it comes to public transit. So then it becomes the question of where do we put those limited investments, and how do we decide what impact that that's going to have? This year is actually the 15th anniversary of MassDOT. We have only existed for 15 years, and a lot of people don't know that. 15 years ago, we were merged, took 6 agencies, merged them into one, because that administration at the time realized that the Turnpike Authority, Transit, Aerodot, all of this overlaps and really needs to be falling under one secretariat. So on November 1st, we were founded. And so what we've done is taken this year, taken MassDOT at 15, and really looked at 3 different items: who we are, what we do, and how are we going to actually pay for it. So the first part of this is Beyond Mobility. This is the statewide long-term transportation plan that imagines what our communities, what our state is going to look like all the way out to 2050. This is the guiding document. This is the guiding document for every mode, whether you're on our roadways, whether you're in our skies, whether you're on our water, whether you're going to the registry. This is the document that dictates what we are going to be doing out to 2050. There are really 6 key elements to this. It's safety, destination connectivity, travel experience, reliability, and especially supporting clean transportation and resiliency. With this plan, which is, I think, about 460 pages, roughly, there are 100 action items. And these went out for public comment, and we received almost 4,000 comments on this. So this really is taking into consideration the entire Commonwealth and every municipality within it. This is going to be leading into what we are also doing this year, which is our strategic plan. MassDOT, as you know, President Clark said, we cover a lot. We touch everyone. In some way, we touch every resident. And for us, we want to make sure that as we are looking out to 2050, that we are structured to be able to deliver on the promises that we've made. So we are looking at the way that we are designed, the way that we provide our services, and changes that need to be made to make sure that we are providing those services as comprehensively, really focusing on equity, and also making sure that we're taking into consideration climate resiliency. Like we've talked about before I got up here, housing. Secretary Augustus and I spend a lot of time together trying to figure out how we can help each other and how we can make these links. This administration, through the Affordable Homes Act, has put $5.16 billion in capital authorizations to help build more housing. And so for us, it's understanding where that housing needs to go, working with developers, working with municipalities to make sure that we are making the same transportation investments. Because if you build housing and people still can't get to where they need to go, that's not an investment that is going to make sense to a lot of developers. I worked in commercial development prior to this job, so I understand that you need to pay the bills. And I understand that we need to make it as easy as possible, whether we're talking about permitting, whether we're talking about making sure that we're giving you the interchanges you need, making sure that we're making transit as accessible as possible. And that really goes to the community cooperation. I spend a lot of time out in the municipalities, which is why I can pretty much speak to every single congested corridor we have in Massachusetts, because I've been on it. But for me, it is actually going out and talking to the municipalities, talking to groups like this, because I don't know what you need. We have 351 municipalities. Every single one of them is different. Every single one of them. Even if they are next door to each other, they all have different challenges. And for us, it's understanding what those challenges are and making sure that we are building grant programs that help with that. Chapter 90 funds is, I think, the biggest thing we hear from municipalities about. Whether it's the ease of getting them, whether it's the ease of actually getting paid back, whether it's needing technical assistance. Every community has that particular issue. Whether you're a community with 300 people and you don't have a planning department. You have usually you'll have like one person in that, community. Usually it's like a small town hall and they can't do 90 different things. So for us, it is really filling that gap. And the thing that we've also talked a lot about is Chapter 90 reform. Making sure that we are not putting in so much red tape that you're not actually able to spend those dollars. The other big thing we've done is we've created a portal called Grant Central. And this is a place where a municipality can just go, using AI, enter in what your problem is, and then we will give you every single grant program we have to help address it. We will then also help you track the applications. We will help you track the funds that you've gotten and make it so simple to actually be able to do this. Because before, anyone that's ever had to file for these, it's, like hundreds of pieces of paper. And it is literally one person's life for months and months to be able to pull this off. And we know that, we've heard it, and we are going to make this as easy as possible. Now, a couple of people brought up South Coast Rail this morning. It seems to be a project everyone is very interested in. It is going to start in spring of 2025. We have been testing out these trains because we wanted to make sure that the service that actually people have been waiting for roughly 70 years for is going to be the best possible passenger rail service we can provide. Phase 1 of this is really working on the Fall River secondary line, the Middleborough secondary line, and the New Bedford main line. We have test trains out there. The test started this past summer, and we are now seeing trains reaching almost 80 miles per hour. We also are going to have 16 new bi-level coaches. This is going to be a beautiful system. This is going to be the newest, best trains we have across the MBTA system. It's also going to be the fastest service that we provide in our rail system. And honestly, for as long as you've all had to wait, we wanted to make sure that it was going to be the best as possible. And it is really going to set the standard for how we provide service. The commuter rail contract is going to be going out, so we're going to be looking at the entire commuter rail system. And are we making the connections? Is it the frequency? And this is going to be the line that sets the standard. Beyond that, I work a lot with Mike Lambert, who I have known for, how long have I've known you for almost 20 years. It's been a very long time. I've known you in many roles. And I have to say, Brockton Area Regional Transit is hands down one of the best RTAs we have in the state. It really is. And I'm not just saying that because he's sitting here. But the way that he has approached his work, the way that this RTA has approached their work, it is once again going with where do people need to go, how do we get them there, and how do we do it in a way that they can rely on it? Because we spend a lot of time talking about commuting. But if you don't own a car, getting to work is not your only problem. It's getting health care, getting your kids to where they need to go, being able to go grocery shopping. And I think that's something we don't talk enough about because we all are just so focused on how long it's taking us to get to work. But when we talk about equity, and I think especially in environmental justice communities, being able to live your life without having a car is just a basic necessity and a basic right of any, quite honestly, any equitable state. And so for us, it's continuing to make investments in our RTAs, especially in areas where we don't have significant MBTA service beyond passenger rail. The MBTA Communities Act, this is really what this was focused on. Where have we already made the transit investments, and how do we build around those areas? Anytime you're building housing, it's controversial. It just is. It's hard. But for us, it's making sure the communities have the resources they need to do it, making sure that we give the support that needs to be done, but then also going back to what I said before, not every community is the same. So it's also for us understanding if housing is not able to be built, why? What support does that community need? What resources do we need to give, and what understanding do we need to have of the reasons why? Because like I said, the fights around housing are happening across the country. It is not unique to Massachusetts. It's happening in every state that people really want to live in. And Massachusetts is a great state to live in. We have great education, great healthcare, and quite honestly, anyone that comes here in the fall to look at the leaves, it's also probably one of the most beautiful states, hands down. And so for us, it's how do we make this a state where people can stay? So I think really the big thing that I want to drive home is that we're here, that we're listening. We're not going to make decisions from Boston. We're not going to make decisions in the State House looking at your demographic information, looking at a map, being like, okay, great, this works. It really is, we need to know what you need. This administration, I think especially having a lieutenant governor that is a former mayor, this administration understands that our communities need our help to the best of our ability, and it is really our responsibility to make sure that you're getting that. So I want to thank you all for just giving me a little bit of time this morning to talk about some of the work. We are very accessible as an office. If you need something, please reach out to us. If it is not falling under transportation, I will make sure that you get connected to the secretary it does fall under. It's probably going to fall under transportation. But for us, a lot of the times we just don't know what the problem is, especially on some of these smaller issues. And it's easy to address a lot of those, but we just need to know about them. So I just want to keep this open dialogue. Like I said, I want to thank you for giving me a little bit of time. I've never gotten to speak in a movie theater, and I was shockingly excited about this. So with that, I unfortunately have to go back to Boston, but the chamber has our contact information, so please, if there's anything I can do, if there are any events or any opportunities I can come speak to either your teams, your organizations, please do not hesitate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary. The Secretary is a problem solver because yesterday on Route 24, the traffic was all the way back to Taunton. Today, knowing that the Secretary would be here, everybody stayed off the road. I did not even touch my brakes on Route 24, and I give full credit to the Secretary. Now we're going to hear from Mike Lambert. Now, Mike, you just heard the Secretary say that you're the best regional transit authority in Massachusetts. So I just want you to know that it's all downhill from here. It's all downhill from here. So we're really happy to have Mike here to talk about more of the regional perspective. Let me tell you a little bit about Mike Lambert. Mike's the Brockton Area Transit Authority Administrator, where he oversees an average of 3 million fixed route demand response and micro transit trips a year. 3 million. Prior to his arrival at BAT, he managed transportation departments at MassDOT and the MBTA. He was also Chief of Staff to the Mayor of Somerville. It's probably easy working for a mayor, I would think, right, Mr. Mayor? But Mike holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from the College of Holy Cross and a Master's in Public Policy from Harvard Kennedy School. And we work together at Bridgewater State because our transit authority really is the BAT Transit Authority as well on campus, and it works really beautifully serving our students. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Mike Lambert.
Going to test our operational acumen here. Kelly and I can be coordinated. Thank you, President Clark, for that kind introduction, and to the Journal and to the Chamber for inviting me here. I just want to also quickly mention that I'm joined by my colleagues, Kelly Forrester, Emily Adams, Michael Damon, Logan Healy, Linda Sacchetti, Maria Samaro, and John Whittemore. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, everybody. Good. Finally, thanks also to Brockton Mayor Robert Sullivan, who serves as the chair of our board, as you heard, and has been a great leader and advocate on behalf of BAT. I'm happy to report that I come bearing good news, but first some background. The question posed for me today, and in general, is how can regional transit support and encourage housing around rail lines and stations? Hopefully the economic and social benefits of regional transit are obvious. You just heard the Secretary talk about some of them. Every day we complete thousands of trips that safely bring people to their jobs or school, to go shopping, or to medical appointments, or to visit their friends and family. But the connection to housing is more complicated and centers on two elements. One, easing present-day congestion by reducing the number of private vehicle trips, and two, easing future development by reducing the number of cars needed per household. For decades, we've struggled with these objectives. Here are just two examples. The graph on the left shows a 33% increase in Brockton's registered vehicles between 2010 and 2024. The second graph shows a 13% increase in average commuting time for the state during that same time period. While increased percentages of auto ownership can certainly be a good thing, considered a good thing for a gateway city like Brockton, worsening congestion is, as we all know, all bad. Not only does traffic pollute our air and make our roads dangerous, it is, as this audience well knows, often the #1 community objection to building more housing. Moreover, congestion makes it hard to run dependable transit service, which can lead to a cycle of increased car use, increased congestion, and so on. Indeed, the effects of car ownership and congestion on BAT's historic ridership levels are clear. While the authority has long benefited from a talented, stable workforce and a community that embraces transit, these headwinds have limited our ability to increase ridership. After a period of high ridership in the 80s and 90s, our numbers began to level off around 2002. Here we're showing ridership for the month of September for the following 14 years, during which we averaged around 230,000 passenger trips per month and pretty stable ridership. Then, despite a 10% population gain in Brockton, ridership began dropping fairly consistently in 2016, thereby also reflecting national trends. We all know what came next. Although it's worth pointing out that even at the height of COVID, we still completed over 100,000 trips a month. The pandemic threatened to completely tip the balance in favor of private vehicle trips. But then the good news. This past month, we provided over 340,000 trips, and this number is not an outlier. We are well on our way to exceeding 4 million trips this year. So how did this happen? First, our capital assets are, and long have been, in a state of good repair. We have a strict plan for regular bus and van replacement that MassDOT has generously supported. Our transit hub, pictured here, maintenance facility, and parking garage similarly receive annual investments and upgrades. Second, relative to the MBTA, we have a focused area of responsibility. Here's a slide depicting all of the regional transit authorities, and our service area is the little purple area around Brockton. This allows us to cover our urban districts and neighborhoods with dense service. Here's an actual depiction of our buses leaving the transit hub during one of the pulses that occur every half hour throughout the day. Our small size also means we are able to be responsive and innovative. We have a strong partnership with Bridgewater State University that you just heard about from the president that ensures good transit service for students and trains future drivers and managers, several of whom are with us today. We implemented mobile ticketing in 2020. We run a microtransit app-based service connecting Rockland to Brockton. All of our buses are equipped with blind spot and front collision warning systems. And tomorrow we'll be cutting the ribbon for the first fully electric additions to our fleet. More on that in a moment. The third reason for our rapid recovery is, of course, money. Whereas historic state operating funding levels seen here have on average increased by about 3% a year, thus lagging inflation, the recent passage of the Fair Share Amendment, otherwise known as the Millionaire's Tax, has made a new revenue stream available to the Commonwealth. The governor and the legislature wisely increased funding for regional transit, and MassDOT allocated the funds efficiently and effectively. Many thanks to the Secretary. The results are clear. Collectively, the RTAs now receive double the amount of state funding that we received in 2018. At the same time, a new grant program has allowed a number of RTAs, including BAT, to run fare-free service. This new funding, combined with our state of good repair and flexibility, allowed us to get new service out on the street quickly. Here on the left is our previous timetable for weekday routes, and on the right, all the blocks of green represent the new frequencies that we have implemented since our funding was increased. While weekday service received excellent frequency enhancements, the more significant changes from a customer perspective were likely on the weekends. Here's a shift to 30-minute headways on Saturdays, and for the first time in BAT's history, we now provide Sunday morning service. So what have these changes meant? While, as we saw earlier, overall ridership has increased dramatically, we wanted to control for the impact of free fares and see if actual travel patterns were changing as well. The results are impressive. This chart shows data from FY19 on the left and FY24 on the right. The column in blue represents average Friday ridership, red represents Saturday ridership as a percentage of Friday, and green represents Sunday as a percentage of Friday. So we're trying to control for the effects of the fare-free program and measure shifts to weekend trips from previous levels. Again, since service was improved, Saturday ridership has increased over 12.5% versus Fridays, and Sundays have increased 10%. We expect the share to continue to grow as word spreads and people change their travel habits to incorporate transit. So what does all this mean for housing, and what's next? As many of you are aware, there's a lot of energy and progress around real estate development in downtown Brockton. This map shows housing production that has already been completed, represented by the green parcels, or is in progress or permitted, and those are in orange and yellow. These projects all represent an exciting remaking of our downtown. So in addition to our service expansions, BAT is doing everything it can to support this development. In an effort to improve downtown open space amenities and match private sector investment, we recently hired Weston Sampson and partnered with the state to plan a vast increase to our green infrastructure with the goal of eventually becoming a registered arboretum that will also provide new pedestrian accommodations and places for people to gather. We're also working with our other member communities to improve residential and commercial connections throughout the region. Just yesterday, in fact, in addition to expanding our microtransit service, we received a submittal from Uber that will be funded by a state grant to provide late and overnight hour service when our buses aren't running. So we will subsidize trips to and from workplaces for people throughout our service area during our overnight hours. This program will be launching in January and should provide a big boost to our hospitality, medical, second and third shift workers. We're also working closely with the city to support their planning and development initiatives, most notably proposed rezoning around all 3 commuter rail stations. The new form-based codes are designed to increase predictability and lower costs for developers and residents alike. At the same time, BAT was the first signatory to a community-based effort to create a downtown business improvement district. This will help us compete with similar communities across the state. And finally, to end on the best possible note in terms of what comes next, we'll be offering free fresh-baked apple cider donuts tomorrow at our annual Customer Appreciation Day, where we'll be not only unveiling our electric buses, which I can't show you here, other than that little picture there, but we'll also be commemorating our 50th anniversary with a bus wrapped to mimic our original 1974 design. So we invite you to stop by tomorrow. And feel free to come anytime between 12 and 3. You see all of our services in action as we try and capitalize our increased ridership and create new long-term customers. Thanks again for your time, and turn the podium back over to President Clark.
That was extremely efficient, just like BAT Transit. Amazing. By the way, I drove a bat bus in a bus rodeo at Bridgewater State. I don't know if that was known to people, that they were letting people drive. It is hard to drive these buses. It really is, actually. You'd think it would be easy, but it's really difficult. Okay, well, we're going to shift gears, and we're going to assemble our panel. We have a really amazing panel, but before I have our panel come up, I think, do we have green forms somewhere for questions? I'm looking. My script says we have green forms, so that means we have green forms, so, no?
I think they're being distributed, but we're not doing that right now.
No, I know.
Yes, yes.
I just wanted to know if you have questions of the panel, you can submit questions either on green forms or by raising your hand. So we're going to have the panel come up, and then I'm going to direct some questions to the panel, and then we're going to hear from you in case you have any questions or if you have any reactions to the Secretary's presentation or to Mike Lambert's presentation as well. So let me have the panel come up. We have already produced their bios online, and they're available here, but we have Stephen DePreet from South Shore Bank, who told me, and I heard him say this yesterday, that he has a trunk full of promissory notes that he wants to hand out in the parking lot in case anybody has any needs from South Shore Bank. We have Rachel Heller from CHAPA. We're really happy to have you here, Rachel. Thank you. You can take any seat you want. I don't think they're assigned. We have Peter Lewis from Shawkett Companies, and we have Paul Mahoney from Hajar Management. These are leaders in their industry, and I think having all of them together will help us to paint a picture of really what we're talking about here with the intersection of transit and housing. Is everybody ready? Okay, your mics are on?
We'll find out.
We're going to find out very shortly if the mics are on. So we have a variety of questions. Before we get to the questions, though, I wondered if the panel wanted to react to anything that was described by the Secretary and/or by Mike Lambert, just kind of in an opening of some sort. Does maybe Rachel want to go first?
Sure. There's a lot that I think was so wonderful about both comments. One, the Brockton transit system makes me want to live here. It's very impressive. I live in Belmont, and my service is not as frequent as some of what I was seeing, especially on the weekends. So that was really neat to see. I appreciate the connection that was made between transit and housing, and hearing the Secretary talk about housing having a transit problem and transit having a housing problem, and what an opportunity that is for us to figure out how we meet both of those needs, how we grow the Commonwealth in a way that is really beneficial to people, to our communities, and to the Commonwealth and our economy. So I appreciate how much these worlds are really coming together to build a strong foundation for the future of the Commonwealth.
Great. Peter?
Yes, so Peter Lewis with Shawkett, and just want to say congratulations to Brockton, really. I mean, for the transportation, again, having the Secretary here, I think it's huge to be able to, I'll say, try and get people out of their cars and into the public transportation. So having that, even that Uber Lyft service after hours when your main hub shuts down, I think is a fantastic thing, especially as you're trying to get the service industry, people to other jobs as far as where they're trying to commute to. So hats off. Congrats.
You want to keep going?
I think to kind of just reiterate what we heard, I think housing and transportation 100% are linked. I think it's exciting to see the development that comes from housing projects that are linked to the rail, both from the employees who can have access, whether it be into Boston or out of Boston. Some of our clients have moved out specifically to the Brockton area, and they're very excited that their employees, who for many years used public transportation within Boston, can now use public transportation down to their new locations outside of the city. So very critical to link the two.
Paul?
I'm Paul Mahoney from Hajar Management, and I'd just like to say I'm amazed. I don't know how many other people were as surprised as I was about some of the increase in ridership, but I am really, really excited about that. So congratulations, and keep it going.
Great. So we have Paul and Peter really representing the development community for the most part, and from an affordable housing perspective. Hold on one second. Affordable housing perspective. No, I think this thing's going. Yeah, I'll try this one. Hold on.
And I'm deaf, feedback. I can hear
Could you hear? Yeah, I think it's buzzing a little bit.
I shut mine off just to. set them for-
All right, is that better?
Yeah.
There we go. So Peter and Paul have kind of the housing perspective, I think the development community perspective. Steve's got the, the banking and the finance piece, and Rachel has the planning, kind of the regional planning perspective as well. I think it's a good combination, but the major focus seems to be on multifamily construction within MBTA communities. I wonder if you could all address how that multifamily zoning requirement will actually work on the ground from your perspective. So how is it going to work from your perspective? How many units of housing do you think we can reasonably anticipate? What's the mix of housing? Is it going to be rentals primarily in this market, with rents being where they are, home ownership, condos, that type of thing? So from a multifamily zoning perspective, kind of your thoughts. Maybe Paul, will start with you.
Well, I think I have a lot of interest in the apartment rentals, and I think there's just a fantastic, and by the way, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I think there's just a fantastic demand for it. And so I'm excited about the zoning changes, but at the same time, it's just having the rail nearby is really enough to create the energy in these different regions. So just the fact that we have some things that we're developing that maybe they're not walking distance to the rail yet, but maybe a mile or two, but that's enough to really get our interest and know that, hey, you know what, let's try to get ahead of this, let's invest, let's throw some money at it and try to build some quality yet attainable type of housing stock, and let's see how it goes. And so far, so good.
Good. Stephen, why don't we just keep going right down the line?
Sure. I think when we look at, just from the bank's perspective, the multifamily asset class as a product you are incented to lend on, both from a community involvement, but also from a business perspective, is always, and for the last 10 years or so, has been the strongest asset class. When you multiply that with access to commuter rail, access to subway, we do a lot of projects along the Red Line, it really multiplies the impact that you can see. Many of these projects rely on something happening in the future, whether it be a for rent or even a for sale, right? So when you begin to want to mitigate that future risk of, will people want to rent these units? Will people want to buy these units? When you add MBTA, or transit-oriented, is the kind of first term that really came out, was TOD type financing, it really begins to mitigate that risk, because you open up a whole world of potential tenants. People who maybe are coming from an area where they do not own a car, right? So the idea that I can move to Brockton, be on a rail link, those types of tenants already accept rail and accept bus. That's one thing that I'll just maybe make a quick aside. My first job was at Bay Bank, and if everyone remembers Bay Bank, I didn't have a car. I used the Red Line, and actually I covered a market that included Belmont, and if I really had to get to Belmont, there was a bus right out of Harvard Square, and I never thought twice.
Still there?
Yes. And so even I think when I went to the Brigham and Women's for a surgery, I took the MBTA to Ruggles and the Longwood Medical Shuttle. So I think as we open up and say, who will be renting these units? Because maybe we'll have a topic later about the rents. They are going up, unfortunately. It is people who need access to either their job, whether it's going to be local in Brockton, or their access to the city. And if you look at some of the MBTA stops, it will surprise you at how quickly a person can get from Weymouth to downtown Boston. A person can get from Islington in Westwood to downtown Boston, or Brockton to downtown Boston. The time will shock you when you think about how long it took you to get here this morning.
Yeah. Mike Lambert really liked that answer, by the way. So while you have the mic, now South Shore Bank has already done some projects, haven't you, that are connected to MBTA communities and housing? And
Sure.
what was your experience there, Stephen?
It's a great question, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention South Shore Bank has some exciting news, and I'll share this. If anyone follows banks, you kind of hear this, but I doubt that anyone does. We have an affiliation, a partnership with Dedham Savings. Many of my new partners are here. So we wanted to maintain that community bank focus, so we took 2 community banks, put them together to really multiply how we can impact our communities. And as mutual banks, first and foremost, our commitment is not to a shareholder or stockholder. We're not publicly traded banks. It's to our communities and how we allocate our capital. So in this particular project that was mentioned is one of the first, if not the first, project to move forward under the new MBTA Communities Act, and is 160 units, 25%, which would be affordable. And as a combined bank, we're both really excited because it showed that a community bank can be in the space. But what's even further, that's even goes beyond, is the commitment from the developer to want to improve the community. I think there's a misnomer that developers are somehow here to harm a community, or they're going to use the MBTA Act to somehow get something passed that isn't good for the community. And my experience, and both with my partners at Dedham, we only work with developers who typically come from the community and want to see their town or city improve. And there's a few here, and I can tell you, if you have a chance to speak with them, they're not looking at the short term. They're looking to revitalize neighborhoods and really use the MBTA Act to promote further economic development. So we're very proud. There was a lot of press. Jane Bowman, our marketing person, she wrote the press release, and I thought, boy, how long have you been in banking to just really nail what we wanted to do as a community bank to be ahead of housing and transportation.
Well said. If it's done right, it's a partnership by both the municipality and the developer to benefit the municipality at the end of the day. And by the way, we all follow banking news, don't we? We all follow banking news. It's very exciting. So Peter, let's keep going, and maybe just a quick word about your entity as well, Shochet Companies, but your perspective on the multifamily housing component of MBTA communities.
Sure, so, is that off? That's on. So again, yes, Peter Lewis from Shochet, so thank you for having me here. I'm the Executive Vice President of Property Management. Our company has been in business just over 50 years. I've been working for the organization 18, been in affordable housing for close to 40 years. We have 2 communities in Brockton, Hamilton Way, Douglas House, right on Haverhill Street, off of Main Street right there in downtown. They're both project-based Section 8 with tax credits. This keeps going in and out.
Yep.
I think that battery, I'm not sure if that's okay. But yes, so again, we don't do a lot in the new construction world. Ours is more from a preservation perspective. If we have someone that comes to us that is either trying to, I'll say, get out of the business, that we will try and step in and preserve that under affordable housing, working with the state to come up with different subsidies, whatever it may be, under the financing in order to keep that affordable. And so again, I think this zoning coming through is going to be, keeps going in and out. Sorry about that. So yes, like I said, really looking forward to it. We will happy to partner with anyone that's looking for a management company. So like I said, but we don't do much on the new construction side, but like I said, really looking forward. I think anything that Massachusetts can be doing as far as developing and putting in apartments is going to be huge, because we are so far behind the curve in developing the apartment inventory that we need, that we've got a long way to go. So to get 40,000 units, I think you said, in 5 years, I think is a huge goal, and that would be tremendous to accomplish that. So that's my take.
Good. Thank you, Peter. Rachel, is CHAPA excited about the opportunities that are presented with the $5 billion and also just the energy that's behind all this effort to create housing in Massachusetts?
Absolutely. Is this working now? I think we're having a ripple effect of mics not working. Is that anyone here?
Rick is giving up his mic.
Swap that one.
Okay.
Gentlemen.
Does this work? Oh, excellent. Okay. Well, yeah,
I'll
let's
hold
work.
that one.
Okay. We are very excited by this moment. First of all, just to think about even the MBTA Communities Act. So for so many decades, we've really been using zoning to say no, to limit growth, to limit our opportunities. And essentially, it's the thing that's holding us back. We've now gotten to a point where we are creating half the amount of housing now than we did back in the 1980s. And our home prices and rents now far surpass what people can afford. So we do need those 200,000 homes, and I would say we need them in the next 5 years. It's actually where we need to go, and that's to stabilize our home prices and rents. Now, we know that these prices are already too high, so that means we need to be very intentional about creating this mix, this affordable housing, housing at different price points. We need apartments, we need condos, we need a lot of different types of homes to meet the many needs that people have. And when you think about what that does when we actually use zoning to say yes to a bright future, you know, this means that, I was thinking about the comments earlier, that teachers, you know, schools have teachers have a place to live, our coffee shops have customers and employees, entrepreneurs can take a chance, people can stay in the neighborhoods where they've lived, where they've raised their families. And it's really a mix of, we need the new, and then to your point, we have to preserve what we've got too, right? So it's 200,000 net new units. That means we need to be producing, we need to be preserving. And the Affordable Homes Act that was recently passed and signed into law is a tremendous investment. Not only does it authorize $5 billion in affordable housing production and preservation, everything from supportive housing for people who are experiencing homelessness, all the way to homeownership. It really ranges the kinds of housing that it supports. But there's also a lot of policies in there, a lot of policies that will help to create the homes that we need. So whether it's allowing accessory dwelling units in every community that has homes, neighborhoods that are all single family, or whether it's creating an office of fair housing to ensure that we are really opening up opportunities for people to have choice. There's a lot in this bill, and it's a real commitment from the legislature and the governor just showing how important housing is to the future of our state.
Do you want to say a word about CHAPA?
Yes, CHAPA is Citizens Housing and Planning Association. We are an organization that's been around now for almost 60 years, and we bring together many stakeholders in the housing space. So we work with developers, for-profit and nonprofit, housing authorities, people who are living in affordable housing, the real estate industry, lenders. We follow banking news, we work with banks, municipal officials, and together we all come together to identify what are the biggest barriers and what are the solutions and how can we come to consensus and then advocate for those solutions. So the MBTA Communities Act actually came out of working groups that we did with affordable housing developers to identify the biggest barriers to affordable housing production. And it really was the lack of zoning, because you can't build what's not allowed. And so to make this change is a real, really opening up those opportunities.
Thank you, Rachel. Now, if you're a developer sitting out there in those big comfy chairs, you're probably wondering, you know, what are the incentives if you have a piece of property or you're working in partnership on a piece of property that's adjacent to or within a 1 mile radius of an MBTA station? What are the incentives that get you to go in regards to housing production within those areas from your perspective? Do you have a sense of what those, is it parking, is it density, is it financing, what is it that really would make it possible to build something that you might have otherwise taken a pass on? Maybe, Paul, do you want to take this one first?
What is it that would make us excited to take on a particular project?
Yeah, within an MBTA community.
The thing is that I like to be able to still offer things like parking, because I'm sort of going, I'm halfway there into the MBTA communities, right? I think the public needs to kind of get there. There's a lot of people, I think, out there that aren't ready to ditch the car.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of people out there that are ready to leave it parked. And you know what? To me, if that's a starting point, I'm good with that. And I'd like to get to a point where we can do a lot more with people not having a car. But okay, baby steps. Let's get there. So if you can have parking, if you can have reasonable access to be able to get to that transit station, that's great. And then what we'll try to do is come in and just provide something that's just not vanilla, right? We want to be able to encourage people to say, hey, you know what, come on in, we're not going to build, I think as I was mentioning yesterday, we're not going to build a glass tower, right, that people can't afford. But we want to maybe do some conversions, maybe do some new construction where there's things that you can offer people that have a touch of class, that have some unique features that people say, oh, you know what, this can really be a home for me. So I think those are the things that we've been excited about and we've been investing in, and we're ready to do more.
Well, anybody on the panel, what do you think the incentives are that are built into these kind of, encouragements of housing within a 1 mile radius of a T station? And/or if you want to go broader, what are those incentives from the development community, the banking community's perspective with the Affordable Homes Act as well, in that $5 billion that's been put out to market? Maybe anybody that might want to jump in on that, Rachel?
Well, I would just say you can already see that just having zoning that allows for it is making a difference. There are communities that have already put their multifamily zoning into place and are now seeing projects come forward that otherwise would not have. It would have been a very long road. We've heard from developers that it's because of this law that they're now considering doing development where that was not on the table before, because before, and really what our typical process looks like, and the developers can speak to this better than I can, it's a very long, winding road to go from an idea of housing to actually getting shovels in the ground to people living there. It can take years. It can take years at the local level, just getting through all of the committees and the boards and the site plan review. It can take years of legal battles. And so when we actually start to say yes to zoning, yes to a bright future, put those rules in place, that in of itself is a huge incentive. Then there's a lot of things that communities can do and a lot that is in this new Affordable Homes Act. So whether it's putting Community Preservation Act dollars to work and investing in housing, so now you can bring down those rents to levels that more people can afford, or it's the programs that have been reauthorized, and there's some new exciting programs in the Affordable Homes Act. So we're fortunate in Massachusetts. We've long had a commitment to affordable housing and have many programs that are authorized every 5 years to invest. This year there were new programs added. For the first time really since the foreclosure crisis in 2008, Massachusetts is stepping back in big time into home ownership. So there's going to be more funding for down payment assistance to help people compete in the private market. There's more funding for the Commonwealth Builder Program, a program out of Mass Housing that's been creating home ownership opportunities in gateway cities. And there's a new home ownership production tax credit that will be able to help support home ownership production all over the state. There's also a new momentum fund that's meant to help these mixed income rental developments that got stalled to move forward, whether it was the high interest rates, the materials costs, all of the challenges that people have been experiencing over the last few years. There's a lot of new tools to help move these things along and put more money in from the state.
And I'll just, again, add to that, to what Rachel said. These deals don't happen overnight. I can tell you some of our preservation deals we have worked on for 10 years before it really came into a closing. And so again, it takes, trying to make sure you're lining up all your funding sources, it's going to pencil out. But as we all know, a deal can go sideways very quickly and you're trying to bring it back to life in different ways. But it's not easy, but it is worth it in the end. But you just got to be in for the long haul.
So what is the market looking for these days in terms of on the housing side? Are we looking for rental? Are we looking for home ownership that was just referenced? Are we looking for 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, a mix of all of that? What's the perspective from the development and the planning and the banking community on what does the market actually call for in this moment in this region? Anybody want to answer that? Stephen?
Yeah, I think when we see the demand from our developers, and I will just kind of follow up on the last point that was made about that 10-year window of something that begins as an idea, and when even we get involved as a bank, it's an expensive process. And I think that's what gets lost in all of this, is that somewhere there is whether it be a not-for-profit or even but primarily a for-profit developer who's invested for so many years that it's going to make this impossible for any individual private developer to continue to have that time frame. So the time frames are just unattainable and can't continue. So I just kind of to follow up on that 10-year window, it's expensive. But going back to the housing, as far as what's in demand is, so our chips are pretty much in really 2 or 3 categories around housing. And we talked earlier about multifamily, and density is the key. The ground underneath is expensive. The time to market to just get through the zoning and permitting is extremely expensive. What's the offset? Well, if I can build more units, okay? And typically around MBTA and zoning, you have less parking need if people are willing to give up the car, and you also can attract higher rents. So that side is really where we've spent a lot of time saying density is the key. In the single-family housing, it might say, gee, let's just build more single-family housing. Well, that's not going to get us to 200,000 or 300,000. That's going to be in the single thousands of numbers of units. And on top of that, the same metrics apply to single-family housing. Land underneath is expensive. Therefore, what are you building? A 3,000, 4,000 square foot house, okay? That's not going to help build, really attain any density. Where we are seeing real great density, but it's coming also at a bit of a cutoff, is 55 and over. These are your downsizers. So these are people that need to sell those houses in the suburbs to make those homes more affordable, more available to younger people who want to buy. Many of them are sort of trapped in the great interest rate or don't have anywhere else to go themselves. So we think we can really help on the 55 and over category, where they're smaller, more dense developments. We have one where, again, when you see the prices, it's kind of shocking what the developer projected they would sell for in 2020. And now that they're selling, it's almost 30–40% more. However, these are 2,000 square feet, 2,500 square feet, more designed for the downsizer, which will open up for single family. So you got to, everything is connected, and I know that probably sounds like a sort of let's draw the diagram and see how they all overlap, but without product on each side of the equation, everything will just remain expensive and stalled.
On the housing mix, sorry. On the housing mix piece, everybody hear me okay? So on the housing mix piece, what are we seeing in terms of ownership, rental, 1, 2, 3, and actually we'll add 55 and older housing into the mix there as well. Anybody else want to address that? Rachel?
I would just say it's all the things. We need all types of housing. We have many different ways that we all live, and so we need everything from supportive housing. We need more rentals. We need more homeownership opportunities. We need accessory dwelling units, smaller homes that people can afford. It really is allowing for more of a range. And the reason why we create half the amount of homes today than we did in the 1980s is because we've gotten very restrictive and very particular. So that's making it impossible to really meet the wide range of needs that people have. We can no longer build a lot of what we see around us. You might see a neighborhood like I live in of 2 families. Under our current rules, we probably couldn't recreate those because we now have those larger lot sizes that you were talking about. And so single family homes have really become the only kind of home that can be built without these lengthy approval processes. And that, as you were indicating, drives up the cost of all kinds of housing. We also don't have the land to be able to keep doing only single family homes on large lots. So from an environmental perspective, from an equity perspective, from an affordability perspective, a competitiveness perspective, that's why so much of this focus is on multifamily housing, but it really is all the kinds of homes are needed.
Peter, do you want to mention anything about what you're seeing with the market in terms of preferences for types of housing?
Yeah, again, we do all the multifamily. So again, we're in Maine, Mass, Connecticut, Rhode Island. We have 5,600 apartments. Again, from a preservation standpoint, like I said, if someone comes to us and wants to exit from the program, that we will work to acquire that asset and try and preserve it. But it is critical. But as Rachel said, it's all types. And I think even on yesterday on our conversation, it came up, for the single family, even the accessory dwelling unit, you're going to run into problems with Title V in some of the neighborhoods that you deal with. And so there's no easy solution, but we've just got to keep working at it to get where we're trying to be. But it is an uphill battle.
Your mention of Title V sort of makes me think of all the infrastructure dollars that are available at the state level. So there's, MassWorks has been around for a long time. A lot of communities use it. It's a great program for improving infrastructure. There's now a Housing Works program that is meant to help make it, improve infrastructure in communities so we can create more housing. And there's now a new program for MBTA communities that is, all the communities that have actually passed it and are in compliance with the law have additional funds that they can seek for infrastructure improvements to help put in the water, sewer, sidewalks, the different needs that communities have. There's a lot of pots of money that can help with it.
Great. Rachel, is there a clearinghouse of information? Does the state keep track of what these communities are doing, what those density bonuses might be, or what those sources of, those state programs, those kind of extra items that might push a housing development into actually being constructed? Is there a clearinghouse if you're out there and you want to check in on other communities? Where do you go?
There's a few places. One, the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities has a lot of information about, especially the MBTA communities. What are the different requirements for the communities in terms of the number of homes? What are the rules? What does it look like? Who's moved down the process? What kinds of funds are available? And then there's some really great tools on MHP's site. It's Mass Housing Partnership, mhp.net. There you can start to look at your community. You can look at the density, what's there now. They have a lot of great tools that help people understand what is the makeup of your community right now, what kinds of housing could be added to actually meet the kind of needs that we're seeing. So I would think between the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities and Mass Housing Partnership, there's some really great tools for people to find out what's out there and also get a sense of what is happening in your community now.
These kind of state incentives are one thing, zoning is another, but at the end of the day, if you're in the development community or the banking community, the rent structures, the cost of housing, what can the market absorb? Interest rates that writ large are also going to be variables that really do govern whether or not you can go forward. I wonder if anybody on the panel can talk, maybe we'll start with you, Stephen, with, where are we with the rent levels, but in combination with the interest rates as well. Are we at a point where the interest rates are getting low enough to really incentivize folks to move, especially with all these other local and statewide incentives? Where are we with interest rates and rent markets and housing costs, as well as is that part of the dynamic?
Sure, and I'm sorry, I think with interest rates, if I had known where we are, I wouldn't be here, I'd be on the boat. But I'm trained for years being in banking, that the interest rates change, right? So they go up, they go down. It's just another factor, another variable that you deal with. So it's not enough to curtail or to start a project, right? So if your project doesn't work, I don't care what the interest rate is, it doesn't work, right? I can give you the free money. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. The opposite applies. If it's a really good project, it'll get through the interest rate environment because the other dynamics, the other factors will be there, or it would just attract a different level. The interest rates assumes that there's a borrowing entity, right? Some projects go forward that don't need a bank, don't need financing, and it's about the return to that developer. What are they going to get in return? And that's where we look at the rent. So I think if you had to start with everything, it's the rental market. That relies upon a strong economy, right? So as rates are going up, I always say, the result of higher rates is a strong, robust job economy. The result of lower rates is potentially a job economy that might be slowing. So therefore, those are your tenants. Would you prefer they be employed and pay us a higher rate? Or would you prefer lower rates and potentially have your tenants unemployed or maybe losing their jobs or seeing their wages decrease? So you could sort of take every side of the equation and say, which one impacts the other? And you just got to see it as one holistic way to move forward. Is it a good project? Are you ready to start? And interest rate, which is a very popular topic, is really a small factor in the equation. The biggest expenses come from just the acquisition of the land, the permitting process, attorneys, and this is if there are any attorneys in the room. You know, those meetings at night, those meetings each week, those meetings each month, that's an expensive investment that shows up later on in the rents, right? So each of these items factors into the other. So interest rate's very popular. It's a good dinner conversation. It's fun to talk about on Saturday night about lower rates, higher rates. It's really is one of the minimal factors when we look at a project. However, would lower rates be better? Definitely. You know, it's not a secret. However, with lower rates, I fear would come some other negative impact, right? They cut rates because they're trying to stimulate an economy, not increase an economy. So I think when we look at the historic low rates we had in COVID, well, that's a national, international pandemic. I don't think we want to repeat that and start over. But, you know, looking at incentives, I think from, you know, what you really start with is, do you have an incentivized banking partner is one. You know, are they willing to ride out the ups and downs? Because every project starts with a prediction of the future. And one accountant once told me that as soon as you hit print on the projections, they're wrong, right? So if that's the case, we're all projecting into the future, and that's built on your past experience. So I think a strong economy, strong infrastructure is key, and to hear just the investments that happen in Brockton. I'm really proud, and I know the mayor had to leave a little bit early, but you know, he welcomed us into Brockton, and as we moved down Metro South, I mean, we weren't far away, we had a branch in Stoughton, but you see the investments in infrastructure, that gives a banker belief that those rents will be sustainable when the municipality's making investments, not cutting back.
Paul, what do you think? You know, the rents are at historic levels. Interest rates are still a little high compared to where we were, you know, pre-pandemic or during the pandemic. What's your sense of the financing market in the context?
I mean, it can be certainly hard to make the numbers work. And, you know, part of the challenge is, as mentioned, it's just you're usually looking at years out, right? So you're trying to predict how, okay, when I'm actually ready to rent this thing, what's it going to be worth? And, you know, you're kind of at that, having that conversation with yourself. Am I kidding myself? Can I really get $2,000 for that unit? You know, and there's people that need housing, and, you know, you don't want to push rents too high. But at the same time, you have to have it pencil out. And some of the construction costs, they have gone really high, and they're only getting higher with the increased demand on some of the codes that have come out now. So it's tough. So, I mean, you need to, number one, be able to have some cash and take some risk to be able to throw that into the mix. So that's part of it. But then there's the leap of faith that you take, and you got to jump in and do it, and then somehow it tends to work. And then, you know, for us, the key is holding it long term. Because you know what? Maybe the first 5 years you don't make any money. Maybe that's okay. If we're around 10, 20, 30, 40 years, eventually it'll come around. You got to have some faith if you want to build some housing.
Peter's patient. You know, he waits 10 years for his projects to get done. He was a young man when the last project was conceived.
I had hair in the last project, so.
What do you think, Peter?
Again, it's all, like I said, as Paul just said, it's a long-term game, and you really have to be prepared, like I said, to be in for that long haul. It's not a short-term thing. You're not gonna, it's not like the house flipping, the single-family house where you're gonna put an investment in there and then recover your money. This is very much a long-term game on multifamily, on the apartment communities.
Right, and I think that is concerning. It doesn't have to be this long-term game, right? This is a system that we have created that's now gotten us into a situation where the Greater Boston Chamber did a survey of young people, and I believe it was 1 in 4 are considering leaving Boston area and leaving Massachusetts in the next 5 years. That is a warning sign to us. You know, one, we can't afford to lose the next generation of business owners, teachers, doctors. We can't afford to lose them. But also, what companies will grow here if we don't actually have the future workforce? So I think, the MBTA Communities Act was a really important shift, and we need all communities to be saying yes, saying yes to housing, to thinking about where are these areas in town that we want to create more vibrancy. We want to have these walkable places where people don't always have to drive, or they can choose to leave their car. And so hopefully this is a big shift, and that each one of us is actually helping to change that conversation in our communities. Because it shouldn't take 5, 10 plus years to build the housing that we need right now. So I don't know what you all think about that, but it doesn't have to be this way.
It doesn't need to be this difficult, but I don't know if there's a quick way to do it either.
Say yes.
And the incentives help too, just as far as, because if you got a lot of people that are on the fence of being able to build something, if all of a sudden there's incentives that all of a sudden the numbers turn, it works, go. And then instead of it being this, oh, well, some people, if they can really swing it for a long time, they might be able to do it. Now it's more attainable to more developers, more's happening. So that's great, that's what we want.
But do you think the time to construction, just the permitting piece, will be expedited under any of these state strategies or local strategies?
Yes, and more needs to be done. So the MBTA Communities Act, our communities, 177 communities are putting the zoning in place. That's only part of the process, right? We've got a site plan review process. What does that look like in each of our communities? We have building permits, we have appeals processes. There are other states that have much shorter runways to getting from an idea to actually shovels in the ground, well less than a year. There are some places where it's months. So we should be looking at what are all of those places within our current decision-making processes that we can move forward. And it doesn't mean that we're not thinking about our communities when we're doing this. In fact, so many of our communities have done really thoughtful plans over the last several decades and haven't been able to put those plans into effect because we've set up this other set of rules in our zoning that really prohibit us from moving forward on these economic development plans. So I think it's great that we've got this one law that's making a big change. Let's keep going. And in our communities, let's look at what we can do to make it go faster, because it really does range. We have 351 different ways of doing things in the state.
351 ways of doing things in the state, but also we're competing against states that do this kind of work on a county level or regionally, but not 351 different ways kind of on their own.
That's a very good point.
It's very challenging. Okay, just one quick question on 55 and older. We, on a previous conversation with this group, we talked about aging in place, and I established that we weren't talking about my son who's 30 living in my basement. That it was really, it's people that are overhoused that really do need to downsize, and they're taking a look. Their kids have moved out and they're empty nesters except for that 30-year-old in the basement, and but they're also locked into a low interest rate, 2%, 3%, 1%. And they're thinking, I have a good deal, yeah, I'm overhoused, but, there's not a good supply of 55 and older housing. They don't have the kind of the single family 55 and olders, but we really do need to move those folks along to open up family housing at the same time. So, I wondered, Stephen, is there a strategy, kind of a interest rate averaging strategy where you can incentivize somebody with a low rate to maybe have a not so high rate, just to get them out of the house and get somebody in their house? What's your thought about that?
Sure. I would remind them that rates are historically at a modest number. So I try to, again, you're not going to get me to answer that rates are high if you haven't heard that. Because historically, that shouldn't be the driver. The biggest driver continues to be availability. I'm approaching 55 and over, so I'm hearing a lot of the conversations amongst my friends who have sold their homes and are looking for that, primarily townhouse style, that usually is what's associated with 55 and over. And it's the opposite. It's the same as when you talk to a young person in your office who's trying to be a first-time home buyer. The middle of the market and the upper end of the market in the housing market, there's a lot of different statistics we're getting back about slowdowns. Over $2 million, you're seeing those stay on the market. But if you see a 2,000 square foot house for $700,000, you might say, boy, that's a bargain. You're probably going to find 10 to 15 first-time home buyers showing up at that open house. The same goes with the 55 and overs. And just to sort of talk about 55 and over, why that became so popular is very similar to zoning, right? You say, you're a local municipality, and again, I'm sort of generalizing. They say, gee, 55 and over, I can get behind that. You know, because no kids. That's no kids, the schools. So you got to understand sort of the rationale of where that came from, and what it's morphed into really is these baby boomers that need a place to go. It isn't no longer about protecting the schools. As a matter of fact, you'll read that in some cities and towns, their school enrollment's down, and they need to pay attention to that. So we have all these numbers. Again, we have great developers, we have great clients who always are looking to get beyond the headlines that most people read. They see apartments, boy, schools overrun, stop. You know, that's kind of where the conversation ends. 55 and over tends to get this welcome, like, come on in. However, there's always a but. What's happened is 55 and over, it's not a guarantee that there won't be kids in that house, right? You know, people having kids later. Families are different today. There's a different makeup of families. So I'm not necessarily sure 55 and over isn't going to solve, like, oh, gee, we're not going to overload schools. It's going to change the dynamic. But 55 and over is a huge key to getting single-family houses available to younger people to buy, those first-time buyers that need to get a house, or else we're going to, I know at South Shore Bank, we're going to lose employees, potentially to South Carolina, North Carolina, wherever they're going to go, because we've given them letters. I think Jim Dunphy, our CEO, has even signed a letter to one of our employees to say, you show up to the open house with this letter. They can't outbid cash, and they can't outbid people over the asking price. So I think 55 and over is critical. It's considered senior living, which you can say, gee, 55 and over, but it's more about that what they're trying to do is get smaller housing in denser in numbers, higher numbers. But even that takes a long time. I could tell you there's many 55 and over projects that aren't moving forward either.
Yeah. It is an aging demographic, Paul. What do you think?
I just wanted to mention also, just from my experience with 55 plus, and we just sort of got into it about 10 years ago, bought an existing place, and if anybody's looking at that, it's amazing that one thing is that, first of all, at the beginning of the month, all the rent comes in. And then we get, whatever, 400 something units. All the rent, it's amazing. Everyone pays the rent. And these people really take wonderful care of the property. It's amazing that when you see the pride that they have in a rental unit. So I would just encourage that.
Can I just add something to the 55 and over conversation? A couple of things. You know, I think there's a few ways to look at this. One, let's just use the term seniors, even though I do not find 55 and over to be seniors at all. I'm with you as I get closer. I'm like, that's not senior, but regardless. There's senior housing, which we have a need for, and there's housing that seniors can live in, which is housing that anybody can live in. And it gets back to that mix. I have a neighbor who, she owned a home in my town. You know, she had been a single mom and a teacher when she moved into town and was able to do that and recognizes that's no longer possible. This was a person who was actually protesting against a development that was being created. Guess where she now lives? She lives in that development and she loves it. And now she is out there telling everyone in town, we actually do need this kind of housing. We need housing that's for me. We need housing that's for more young families. We need housing for everybody. And you know, there's something that is happening as we get so restrictive in our zoning. We're trying to pick what kind of household to live in our community. It's really hurting us. You know, we are seeing schools close and then get turned into senior housing. We don't want that. I'm a little biased, but I think children are good. And it's also, we have an interesting way of looking at our municipal financing. You know, when you have more people, you actually are sharing the costs. Our costs are increasing. You all know this. And there's also economic contributions. When people, more families live in town, more seniors live in town, more people of all types, you're seeing more economic activity. And so I think we need to look a little bit more broadly and be able to create all those kinds of housing that people need and not get so caught up, that family's gonna cost us more. To your point, families change. You have no idea what could happen in someone's life. They could suddenly have kids later in life and, you know, you couldn't plan for that as a town.
And just to add to that, we do need kids coming behind us.
That is a very bold statement.
It's, again, if we don't have people coming behind us, what happens to us as a community? You then start dying off, and if you don't have young people coming into your community, you're not, again, it's just, makes sense in a lot of ways, but again, I'll call it the not my backyard NIMBYism sometimes on issues causes a bigger problem when really we should just have it with open arms and bring it in.
Well, you can look at Cape Cod in terms of the lack of kids, closing schools left and right, and the employers really, really struggling to bring in talent, never mind getting over the bridges and that type of thing. So that could be the future of Massachusetts if we're not careful, I think. So I just have one more question, and then we're going to go to audience questions. I do have some green sheets. Don't forget, if you want to ask a question, fill out your green sheet, give it to our friends from the chamber, and we'll get to, I think, all the questions because we're a little bit ahead of the game. But this question is really more specific to South Shore Rail. So obviously we're going to be serving communities that are at the moment unserved. So Fall River, New Bedford, but all other communities in between. And the question really from an R. Sullivan from the city of Brockton, I'm not sure who that is, was do you see development opportunities in the city of Brockton, where you may have folks coming up from the South Shore, but they don't want to stay on the commuter rail, even at 80 miles an hour to get to Boston, that they might want to get off in a community like Brockton or Bridgewater, or any of the communities in between, from a commercial office perspective. Do we see any opportunities for commercial development because of these incentives along the rail lines? Anybody have any perspective on that? Paul?
I think it's tough. It's tough. You really, there's enough office out there, and there's enough people working remote, and the needs are so small. I think, in my opinion, before I would run into invest in some office type product, I think things need to move along from people working a little bit less out of their homes. Right now, they need the space in their home. And hopefully later on, they're going to need more office space, but we're not there yet.
Anybody else on the commercial side, office side?
I would say the opportunity, I think, is really around industrial. And I say industrial, this would be light manufacturing, any type of company. This is a whole other side of our business. We talked a lot about real estate development. As a bank, we lend to a lot. Anything you consume is delivered, made, packaged, distributed here. Those are our kind of prime clients. And their biggest challenge is access to employees. So when you start thinking about linking Fall River, Brockton, and the access to employees, I think there's an opportunity not only just housing, but in bringing companies around the rail that'll locate their physical plant. And it possibly won't be adjacent, in the same parking lot, like as extreme as Montilio's down in Brockton, but within that 1 or 2 mile radius where there could be a shuttle. So, if anyone hasn't been to Boston lately, I don't think they'll ever build a new, industrial building there. It's residential or massive towers, right? These glass towers. So you have a company that's been in Boston for 100 years making something, right? They're manufacturing something. They cannot expand there. And I'd say this with all due respect to anyone who's from Boston, we've all are rooting, but they're looking to leave the city. And they want a place that they can access employees, typically skilled labor, people that are coming from different locations that may have transportation issues, may not have a car, or may need just, or are more comfortable. So I think that's the opportunity, is really, we talked a lot about housing and mixed use. I think that's really the kind of primary when you see a rail. The secondary opportunity is industrial around that area to bring the employees in from outside the markets.
Anybody else have a comment on kind of maybe the office, commercial kind of component of all this? I'm sure the Secretary of Transportation.
Actually, I have
Where is he?
I'm
It's the
over
voice of God. Where is he? Oh, there he is. I'm sorry. Rick.
I've been mistaken for that many times. No, my question is, you know, this isn't a question, it's more of a statement. I do these events all over New England, and some are Western Mass, some are north of Mass, and I do this in the Metro South and south of Boston, South Shore area. We don't have enough industry coming out this way because of, and I don't understand it, because we have a transportation system, a public transportation system, and now it's going to be improved. If you look like in the Middlesex area, there's a lot of companies that are opening up manufacturing there, and that has limited public transportation. So I'm not really getting why this is being overlooked. And I'm not sure if anyone can answer that, and I'm not sure even, you know, anyone from our public transportation system could answer that. But doesn't it sound a little confusing that you have them? I mean, granted that Middlesex area is probably more of a highway infrastructure, but everyone knows how our highways are right now. You know, you can't move on them. So public transportation would be a very important part of that. And we're going to have it now in the Metro South, and we've had it on the South Shore area.
I would say to that, the companies we've got, we can't take for granted. And I think as it gets harder for people to live anywhere near these work centers, that there's choices to go elsewhere. You know, I talk to business leaders around the state, and they talk about how they know of companies that are getting recruited elsewhere. Come to our state. You know, so I think if we are making these improvements in transportation and housing and making it possible for people of all income levels to live in all of our neighborhoods, that's when we're at this healthy spot that we can actually make sure that the businesses stay and new ones want to come, and that we have more thriving future.
The more you concentrate employment, the more paralysis you're going to have in your transportation network. So, you know, one of the questions maybe we can have for the secretary and for the administration is, what are those decentralization strategies for employment? And what are the best practices, not just in the United States, but across the world? You know, Europe has figured this out, I think, much better than we have. So, yeah, we can't keep going the way we're going. I think that's a good point, Rick. And in southeastern Massachusetts, we need more employers to be drawing employment here and getting people off the roads, hopefully on trains and buses, but also just off the roads. So we have, I think we're going to shift gears. Did you have any other questions, Voice of God?
Oh, me? I can give you a whole list.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, first of all, you know, I'm over 65, and you know everything's headed to 55 and older. You know, but where's the 65 and older?
You get to go in there too. It's 55 and older.
You qualify, Rick.
And plus, I'm the 65-year-old living in my son's basement. You know, so it's getting reversed now.
Turn the table on its head there. We have a senior college at Bridgewater. We never ever define senior. If you think you're a senior, you are. If you don't think you're a senior, you're not. We leave it at that.
Well, in some cases, you have to think you're a senior to get some benefits, so.
Gotta get the discount.
I'm just saying.
All right, we're going to go to our green questions here, our green sheet questions. Again, if you have a question, just send it down. But actually, the first question, Mike, I'm going to have you answer because it's about free transportation, free public transportation. Is there a future for free transportation in Massachusetts, kind of across the board? You see elements of it with BAT, you see elements of it in Boston with the MBTA. What's your perspective of free transportation?
Thank you for that question. So the biggest experiment in that field is happening right now. The legislature provided $30 million this fiscal year for all of the regional transit authorities across the Commonwealth to provide up to a year of free service. So this is coming on the heels of sort of 2 or 3 month pilot programs. So that what's happening unfolding right now will be a good test of the effectiveness of a fare-free program. Obviously, what we've seen in Brockton has been a great success. But I will point out, as I did in the presentation, that we were able to combine the Fare Free program with service additions as well, so that we need to be still, and first and foremost, providing on-time service that people can rely on in order to get to work, and then providing frequent enough service so that people can, should their schedule change, or should they want to travel on the weekends, that they can still rely on transit. So it's not just the fact that we're providing free service, it's also that we are there when people need us and can get them to their destination on time. What I think we're hoping for, if this experiment goes well, is for the governor and the legislature to work on making this official. I think there would be a cumulative effect to the state saying clearly and loudly, at least outside of the MBTA service area, because they're a much more complicated entity to deal with, transit service will be free. And I think that proclamation is one that would be heard nationwide and sort of would have a multiplier effect in terms of Massachusetts saying, yes, we realize we're expensive, we realize that it's a tough place for people to find housing, but we're going to at least solve this one problem in terms of people getting around their communities. So that's what we're hoping for coming up in next year.
Thank you very much, Mike. We have another question. This is kind of an infill housing question. So if you have existing housing units, what are the incentives for accessory units connected to those, or maybe in-law apartments and that type of thing? How do we make use of the housing stock we already have to hopefully leverage it to house more people? Obviously, you have limitations of septic and things like that, but what's the sense of that as a strategy? Maybe Rachel first.
Yeah, so it's an important part of the strategy. You can certainly think about housing as a puzzle, because there are so many pieces that are needed to provide the many different types of housing that people need. There has been so much excitement about accessory dwelling units, which I think shows that this is something that people want to see. And it's really coming from a lot of different spaces. We've had mayors in some cities talk about how important it is to be able to legalize apartments that are already there, to be able to get those up to code, make sure that people can continue to rely on that rental income to maintain the homes that they've got. We hear from people with disabilities and their families about how this allows for independence and really for more people to be able to thrive and stay in their communities. We've heard from seniors about how important this is to be able to, again, stay in their homes and be able to age in place as an option. And it's a way that we've seen across the country to create some more homes at different price points, so not everything has to be a $2,000 to $3,000 rental. Now, it does cost a lot still to create accessory dwelling units. I know some people think you can just order it off of Amazon these days, and there you go. But you have to make sure it's high quality, it's hooked up to all the utilities. And so I think we hopefully we'll see some new products from banks and others that help to make this possible, for people to finance them. But it's definitely an important piece of the housing puzzle.
Anybody else want to comment on that? Infill housing.
I think I'd like to just say that just even beyond the housing piece, I think it's just a great family piece too, to be able to pull things together. And I'm of that age now where I'm trying to work with some of the older folks in my life and trying to help them along. And being able to have somebody really nearby like that, and I don't have that set up myself, but it would be amazing because, boy, if you don't sort of see that coming, look out for it, because when it's there, it's you realize that there's a lot, and it's so wonderful to be able to try to be there for somebody, even if it's 5 minutes, even if it's just stopping by to help out. So I think that's just a hidden benefit of the ADU.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll just add, again, just from a personal perspective, I think it's huge because it just helps, I'll call it families that maybe have aging parents that you're trying to take care of. You can't afford to go to a nursing home, but you can bring them into your home if you have the space and give them their privacy and be able to let them live there, but also take care of them and their needs as they're aging in place.
Yeah. Well said. Okay, I think there's a big need for that. You know, I don't always see the encouragement from a municipal perspective or the state perspective for that, but that's just the reality of our lives. Rachel?
Well, the new law, it really put that zoning into place. So the new law states that every community that has any area zoned for single family, now there is a by right ability for people to create accessory dwelling units. Now, there are some caveats. There's still the ability of communities to determine setback rules and the site plan review process, but essentially, that change has happened, and it should be available to people early in the new year. The law will go into effect.
That's good to hear. All right, we have another question here. Are there any developments in these districts that we can point to that limits cars per unit? Any current developments that anybody's aware of that limits the number of cars per unit, basically overshadowing or overriding a planning board requirement for how many cars per unit type of thing? Anybody know? Rachel?
I don't know. I mean, that's going to come back to the individual town zoning for what their requirements are, but I don't know.
Right. So we're seeing, a lot of our communities require more parking than is needed, even in places that are more car dependent. So I've certainly heard of people speaking up in their communities that they own apartment buildings and they talk about 25% of the spots never being used. You know, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council has done they're the planning agency for 130 communities on the eastern side of the state, and they've gone and looked at parking lots of multifamily buildings overnight and how much is utilized, and can see that it's overbuilt. In Cambridge, the city council did eliminate the parking requirements, and so they did it in a thoughtful way. You have to look at what's happening in your community, right? And so they could see that more than X percentage of their community, people actually didn't own cars. So it's a matter of figuring out what's the right size. There's some communities that think about parking maximums, where maybe they'll say it's a maximum of 1.5 spots, but they leave it up to the developer to determine what can this actually support, what is there a market for. And then there's also, yes, the idea that you just eliminate the requirement and again allow the developer to determine what's actually needed in this area.
Good. Well, there's another question. I think we may have answered this. So there's a housing developer in the audience who is looking to find some central clearinghouse of information to be able to find pre-permitted multifamily housing districts that are already out there. And again, we may have answered this question, but
kind of.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So until the MBTA Communities Act was passed, there really weren't many spots that you could do multifamily zoning by right. So now we're at a point where 78 communities out of the 177 have actually approved their multifamily zoning. I believe it's 33 or 34 have made it through the entire state process. And so you can find on the state's website who has gotten through that whole process, but I don't yet know of an overall clearinghouse. It might be the state that will ultimately have it, maybe on MHP's site, but you can at least find out which communities have gotten through the entire process on the Executive Office of Housing Livable Communities website, and that can help direct you to where there might be zoning in place.
So, I mean, that information sharing is really critical, I think, if we want to get something done, so we're not recreating the wheel 351 times, especially if it's already been created somewhere. All right, we have I think we're just about out of our questions unless somebody has a question out there, but someone noted that they're trying to build a grandmother's village project in Randolph, seeking partnerships and agencies to help us break through red tape. I know that doesn't usually occur in housing and transportation, and they're looking for partners. So that person, you may want to raise your hand. You want to raise your hand if you're here? Oh, right there. Okay. And if you're looking for, there we go. So I think I got most of it here. And I like the idea. It's kind of eco-sustainable. And I guess maybe one quick question out of this is, do you see an interest in the housing market for sustainability? Are consumers asking for solar panels and sustainable kind of strategies along those lines? you know, what are you seeing there, and especially maybe the younger generations that might be asking for these kind of amenities? Anybody?
Absolutely, and I don't think we have a choice anymore. It's so clear that we need to be building more sustainably. We also have the specialized energy code that many communities are adopting that's essentially building to a passive house standard. We have to make our homes more resilient. We are seeing with all of these storms just how much housing stock we're losing. And so this is going to be the new way. Definitely, I see it on the demand side. I don't know how the developers and the lenders see it.
Yeah, no, for us in the, I will call in the HUD world, we have done sustainability since 2009. It is something that has to be done, and again, just trying to make sure whether you're putting in solar, whether you're putting in efficient heating systems, windows, whatever you can do for weatherization to help save on that energy efficiency, it drops to the bottom line, so it makes a lot of sense. But you need to be doing it, again, from a resiliency standpoint. Again, we have Mother Nature just hammering us on storms, and so we just need to be as prepared as we can, and if you think you thought of all of it today, tomorrow it changes. And like I said, whatever you can build in for redundancy, resiliency, we need to be doing at all times.
I would just add, from a perspective of the finances, that does add cost, right? So again, you come back to increasing housing supply, increasing or decreasing rents. These initiatives require incentive. I just don't know if there is the term you brought up earlier, and I thought I would avoid it today, but the old penciling out. There are numerous projects that just don't pencil out, which means the numbers aren't working, because when you add some of these initiatives we all want to see come forward, right? Every one of us wants a cleaner environment, especially living here in Massachusetts. We have our mountains, we have our oceans. It's why we all live here, right? It's why we all endure the traffic. We all endure so many things, but what it comes down to is a great place to live. So all of us want to see these. It's going to require heavy, heavy, heavy incentives. It just, right now, it's impacting cost more than interest rate is some of the new requirements that are sort of being flushed out, right? You know, I think the end result is there. Do we want it lower cost? Do we want to have a cleaner energy? Of course. But to pay for that, there's a lot of offsets, and I think we're going to have to see people coming together to figure out how do you bridge the gap now, because that may be the difference in a project moving forward or not moving forward, or how much affordability can you have in the rents if you've now got a higher budget. What do your rents need to look like? So everything impacts everything, and I do think that's something that needs to get more to the forefront, is how do you pay for this? Not necessarily, I think all of us can agree it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, well,
Now
and I'd say the good news is I think people are coming together around this. Massachusetts has established a green bank that is being run out of Mass Housing, and really working with the different government agencies that are bringing in the federal funds that came, from the Infrastructure Act, and also bringing together the different state funds. This is another spot where communities can really invest their Community Preservation Act dollars to help make deals pencil out. I think you're right. We do need to acknowledge it costs more. And like you were saying, a lot of everything we want costs more, and we want more affordability. Unfortunately, to me, it's my goal in life to create more affordable housing. It costs more. If we require more parking, it costs more. If we require, better sustainability standards, everything costs more. And we need to look at that investment and what we're getting out of it for the long run, and get through that tricky part of how we pay for it right now.
Well, we wish the Grandmother's Village project well, eco-sustainable, net zero, low-income housing for elders of color in Randolph, which, by the way, is one of the most diverse communities in Massachusetts, that people don't realize just how diverse it is. So we wish you well. Yep. And we're at the end of the green questions here. I want to just see if Rick Kaplan wants to ask the final question before we ask the panel for any final thoughts here.
Wait, Barry has a question.
Barry, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you. Question and a quick comment. Just picking up on something that Rachel said about the MBTA Communities Act, which certainly is a good thing in terms of allowing multifamily housing as of right. However, many of these things are still subject to site plan approval, which is You talk about 351 different ways of approaching site plan approval. I think the legislature needs to look at that, because even with as-of-right housing, the whole site plan approval process can extend the permitting to these projects for unreasonable periods of time. So that's my quick soapbox comment. My question is, and I want to ask the secretary, but obviously she had to leave early. We've talked about the southern end of South Coast Rail in Fall River and New Bedford. Does anybody know what the sort of more northern end piece? I remember years ago, people talking about the Stoughton option. I don't know if that is still the plan. Does anyone on the panel, or perhaps anyone in the audience know? Chris, do you know?
Yeah, I think Chris probably knows, but the Stoughton to Easton option is dead.
Okay.
Mostly because of the Hockomock Swamp, and that's one of the reasons they went through Bridgewater and Middleborough Lake.
Okay.
Chris?
Right. So that's not what Governor Baker said. What he said was that was planned down the line, the long-term plan, and that the interim plan would be to build what was just built and will be opening in March, which is everything through Brockton.
Okay.
But he did not rule out. In fact, his plan was that that is the ultimate goal, is to restore that line as well. But in the interim, the Brockton route is the route of choice right now.
Great.
But I think Fred's assessment probably is, for everyone in this room, more realistic, that we probably will not see the financing or funding for that project in our lifetime.
Good, great, thank you.
If you're over
Thank you to the
55.
panel.
Oh, anything about site plan?
Oh, yes, I
approval?
love this topic, site plan review. It sounds very wonky, but it really determines how long it takes to get something done and what a development eventually looks like. There's not really a statutory definition for site plan review, and there have been bills that have advanced in the legislature that would define it and help communities understand what falls under it and what doesn't. With the new legislative session starting in January, I'm hopeful that there will be more bills filed just to really create some predictability and clarity so that things are objective. What are the kinds of decisions that can be included in this process and what's just not part of it. And that will help to reduce the timeline of how long it takes to get through these processes. There's also more communities, I think, are moving into a form-based code, which is helpful, where communities spell out a little bit more about the kind of designs they would like to see, so that developers know, when I'm building in this area, this is what the community wants, and that should make for an easier site plan review process as well.
Rick Kaplan, New England Real Estate Journal, do you want to ask the final question before I ask the panel for final thoughts and wrap up by 11:30?
I think I ran out of questions.
Really?
One question I have is, why did you all have so many problems using this microphone? I feel it works fine for me. I feel like James Brown.
To replace the batteries, who are you kidding?
All right, no questions from the voice of God. Any final thoughts from the panel? And before we wrap up, I have a couple of chamber announcements, and we're going to wrap up. But any final thoughts? Why don't we start with Paul? We'll go right down the line.
Just thank you everybody for getting together, and some great discussion. And I've definitely learned a lot from some of the panelists and some of the folks that I met earlier, as well as some of the speakers that we had. So I appreciate everyone taking the time today.
Thank you, Paul. Stephen?
I would just echo that. Thank you, and thank you, Chris, for hosting us. I think these topics are critical to really have all of the parties involved having a real conversation, so we can get beyond headlines, get beyond kind of what gets put out on social media, to really say these are good people, these are well-intentioned programs from the state, from the communities, these are good developers, and they're all trying to work together, and let's move them forward and cut the costs down so we can bring down rents, bring down housing costs, and because otherwise we're just going to keep spinning our wheels no matter how much we do. If it takes too long, the costs are going to stay flat or continue to rise. So I'm excited that people like Chris are putting these panels together, and we probably need a lot more, and I appreciate the secretary coming here because it shows that this part of the state, which we're all very proud of, Route 24, Route 3, 95, has industry, has housing, has the right mix, and really is a diverse community that we want to see continue to grow. And it's going to take a lot of options around creativity, because we can't grow and add more cars on the road. Anyone who works with me knows I hate traffic. On any night of the week, you'll find me at Alba and Quincy, because I cannot drive home at 5:30, I prefer to drive home at 7, and it's just something that we can't continue to just pile more cars into a finite area. And all of us have thought, gee, can we add more? There's just nowhere, you're not going to add any roads. So the only way to do it is to track the cars.
You're here. Peter?
Yep, so just want to say thank you and apologize that the PowerPoint did not advance, but if you're interested, I'll let Rick email it out to the participants. But again, thank you, and really do look forward to seeing this, I'll say, grow and thrive, because I think it's a great opportunity.
Rachel?
I will echo the thanks. It is so important that we bring together different groups of people, different areas of our lives, transit, housing, the economy, all of these things are connected. And just in closing, rarely are problems so solvable. We can actually create the homes that we need. We can put in the policies that allow for our communities and our state to thrive. And you think about what makes Massachusetts so great. We have a great quality of life here. Not only is it a beautiful state, as the secretary was talking about, and she also mentioned, we're the first state that made sure everyone could have health care. We recognize same-sex marriage first. We are a state that solves problems, that cares for our people. And this is the thing that we need to come together around now. We need to make sure that everybody can have a place to live that's safe and healthy and really matches their goals. We need to make sure people can move around and get to where they need to go. And we can do this. We created these systems, so we can make the systems better.
We can and we must.
We must.
It's in our own interest. Before I thank the panel, I just want to note the Chamber wants to remind you that the 111th Chamber Annual Meeting and Business Expo is on November 20th from 11 to 2 o'clock with Speaker of the U.S. Chamber, Chief Economist Curtis Dubé. And where is that going to be held, Chris?
At the Teen Challenge Center.
Teen Challenge on Main Street in Brockton. It's a terrific spot. We also have a ribbon cutting November 6th at noon for Convenient Health opening on Belmont. So with that, let me thank our really wonderful panel. Thank you so much for your comments and your wisdom. We want to thank Secretary Tibbetts-Nutt also for stopping by and giving us the good news on a spring ribbon cutting for the new rail. 80 miles an hour, the best in the state, the best practice for the state, the standard for the state, that's what I heard. And I also want to thank Mike Lambert for your presentation as well, Mike, and the good work you do at BAT. And we want to thank Chris Cooney and the Chamber and the Chamber staff for bringing us together, but in particular, Rick Kaplan and the New England Real Estate Journal as well. And Rick, back to you.
Thank you, Fred. I want to thank Fred Clark. No, it's cut out on me. I want to thank Fred Clark. He did a fantastic job, as always, and the panel also did a great job. Can we get an applause for them? I also like to thank Chris Cooney and the Metro South Chamber. They also are a partner. This is our 5th year, and it was a great event this time. Well, it always is, but I'd say it was exceptional this time. Good conversation, and needed. And before we go, I have to thank all of our sponsors. I have to thank Rockland Trust Bank, Select Energy, Northeastern Savings Bank, Platinum Partners, MassDOT, South Shore Bank, Northmark, Mongo DeStefano Architects, and U.S. Pavement. And again, I want to thank everyone for coming out today, and I hope you have an enjoyable afternoon.